So, and I know you've used offshore teams actually before the previous
Yeah.
companies. So, what's the worst experience that you had with an offshore team, and how did you resolve it?
Yeah. So I think I've probably had worse experiences than this one, but I think the thing I think that I've seen it on various levels. I've seen it just purely as like, okay, go to an offshore contracting company, give me like five devs and whatever, to where I am now, where we've like hired people directly and are paying them directly, stuff like that. I think there's a whole spectrum of how you do it. I would say one of the experiences I had that was very informative was an engineer who came on, good engineer. He actually came as a recommendation from another engineer I had, and was writing pretty decent code. But whenever we were like in conversations, he was always kind of he was always it was always unclear how much he was getting, if it was actually like resulted, like ultimately he was doing a project and he needed to understand it and push back, and uh like he was owning the architecture of it or whatever, and help drive those things. And it was like we would be in these like hour-long conversations, and like he didn't
Mm.
speak a word, and like I'm not sure how much he got, whatever.
But
Uh,
so were these conversations sorry, were these directed
yeah.
at him, or was this like was it kind of
Usually they
between
were
two
more
people?
group.
Okay, okay.
It was like there's like a couple people, and he was one of the couple people. And yeah, so it was like frequently about like a project he was working on or whatever else, where he should be pretty involved. And he had a lot of experience, so it wasn't like he was like a junior engineer who just kind of like soaking in
Right.
whatever. Anyway, it just wasn't working out, and we mutually agreed it's time to leave, whatever. What I came to discover was that it's pretty common for these offshore folks to be working three, four jobs
Mm.
simultaneously. And ultimately what was going on under the hood is like he's multitasking, he's got four Slacks open, trying to
Mm.
work across all these different companies.
It's crazy.
Anyway, so I think it was just very informative to like yeah, the output
And
is
this
clearly a difference.
and this wasn't a small. I imagine people think like, oh, well, if you go with an untrusted source, a small
Yeah.
shop that hasn't been validated, you might
No.
get that. I mean, I think
No, this is across the board.
this is a sizable
Yeah,
company,
this is
right?
no, no, no. This is a huge offshore, yeah, offshore like contracting company that just works with a bunch of people. And
How did you find that out? Like, I'm imagining the
yeah,
I'm imagining the company was not necessarily forthcoming about like, hey, he spread across 5 projects.
yeah, no, no, no. Yeah, it was through a friend who was themselves doing that, who I didn't work with anymore. Who was like, "Hey, just so you know, I don't want to work for you because I don't want to do this to you. This is
So
the situation."
okay, so it was a friend of yours who was also at an offshore company
Who had
or
worked, yeah, who
he
had worked for me previously.
worked for you previously.
And he like I had been getting advice for him from him on like offshoring and like people to
Okay.
hire and stuff
Okay.
like that.
So you had reached out sort of separately, not in relation to the company that you were working with, but separately
Yeah,
you're saying, "Hey, I'm working on a separate project, whatever, looking for offshore resources. Are
yeah.
you available? Do you know anybody?"
He didn't work for me anymore.
Yeah.
And so then he was free to like tell me
He,
what the situation was.
he was free to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, what's going on there? Okay.
But
So,
I mean, from the standpoint of like their perspective, it makes a lot of sense. Ultimately, they're getting paid peanuts to some degree, and they're just kind of being tossed tickets over the wall for all intents
hmm.
and purposes, because like that's how US companies have kind of figured like, okay, this is the way to do it. Like we just like throw them things over the wall, they'll get them done eventually, whatever. So what he found was like he started working one company, and what he was like so little work, he would just like nap all day between tasks, and then he was like, "Hey, what if I just like go get another job? How about a couple more?" Whatever. Anyway, so it's a self-propagating problem, because then they're like these engineers are good, but they're not actually producing a crazy amount of work because they're doing a bunch of things. So then the companies don't improve things or anything, and they're just kind of like, okay, well, whatever. So they just have to keep doing that.
Is there as like again, is there a way? to hedge against. I mean, it was like if you're an engineer at a big company, you know, your boss is probably making those decisions, and there's not a lot you can do other than
Yeah.
make the most of the cards that you're dealt. But being in your position now where you can make that choice, how do you
Yeah.
is there a way you can like head that off from the beginning and let them know like this is not we're not a ticket shop. I'm not going to just be sending you random tasks. It's like I want you because I assume that you want your teams you want that team culture, right? You want them
Yeah.
embedded, you want them, you know,
Yeah.
high communication, high transparency.
Yeah.
How do you how do you still leverage that offshore team but still I don't know, like is it reasonable for us to expect that culture?
Yeah, yeah. No, I have found it's very reasonable. You have to find the right people, obviously, and I think like ultimately you can't just be like, "Hey, are you working multiple jobs?" Like, of course, they're never going to tell you that. Uh, but but what I found is like as you make the culture very clear that like, ultimately like you're looking for someone who's gonna own the product and who's going to like get deep in the business side of things and whatever. Like these engineers want that. They just aren't given that. And so
Mm,
when they have that opportunity, they're like, "Oh yeah, this would be great. Like this is worth potentially even a pay cut to some degree,
mm.
to be able to like have this focus and like have this thing that like we can like build this team, build this company, build this product."
They get that ownership and that autonomy
Yeah.
that they're missing, which as we in a I don't know Western culture we seem to kind of take that part for granted now that like that's how we get our meaning and everything, but maybe that's
Yeah.
not as popular of thinking in other cultures.